mental treatments can continue to such an extent that they bring one really under the hypnotic spell of those suggestions. And while it all may seem to be well for the moment, it certainly can't last as a permanent dispensation, because hypnotism wears off, mesmerism wears off, the powers of suggestion wear off. That is why in the infinite way we are instructed: never address your patient when you are treating. Never have your patient in your mind. Never permit the name or identity of your patient to come into your thought when you're treating. How are they to get the benefit of it? Well, they asked you for the help. They have made the contact with you. Now, the truth that you know in your consciousness becomes the law unto them. Therefore, it is never the truth when you have you in your treatment, because the you that you're addressing has just told you they're sick, so how can they be the child of God or spiritual or perfect or immortal? In other words, the human, the mortal, is never immortal or spiritual. It can't be, because the work that we're doing and the study that we have undertaken is to make us die daily, so that we may be reborn of the Spirit. Now, what's the use then of telling that which is to die that it's already spiritual? Know that your treatment, after someone has asked you for help, your treatment consists of your bringing that word God first, and realizing within yourself the nature of God, the allness of God, the omnipresence of God, the omniaction of God. And here's where I'm going to go off now to that I started with, that was coming through, the law of God. And you may have this come up in your treatments. God, according to Scripture, is the lawgiver. Since God has nothing to give but himself, the law of God must be as much spirit as God. Therefore, the law of God is a spiritual law. Therefore, since God is infinite and all law is spiritual law. There is no other. Ah, yes, but now here is material law and mental law. Yes, but in the allness of spiritual law, material law and mental law must be of that carnal mind or nothingness and inoperative. You'll find that you have nullified infection and contagion without even mentioning them. You'll find that you have nullified hereditary law, the law of heredity. You'll find that you have nullified laws of food, laws of climate, laws of weather. You'll find also that you have nullified the Hebrew law of 70 years and 10. I suppose you know that that is one of the most cataclysmic laws operating in human consciousness. We all try to think we're Christians, and then we go back to the Hebrew law of 70 years and 10, like we go back to the Hebrew law of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now, you cannot, as a Christian, if you want to be a Christian, you can't accept the law of 70 years and 10, because the Christian law is I am life eternal. I am immortal. I was never born and I will never die. That's the whole basis of Christ Jesus' teaching. Now, I want you to understand that I don't accept it as a Christian, because I have never acknowledged that I'm Hebrew or Christian or Buddhist or Vedantist or Taoist. Because my life is lived under the law of God, and it knows no religion and no sect and no creed and no color and no race. These laws under which we live and which we're teaching in the infinite way, are universal laws. Some of them were given to the world by Lao Tzu. Some of them were given to the world by Buddha. Most of them were given to us by Hebrew mystics and prophets. And a few of them were given to us, and most of them repeated by Jesus Christ and have been embodied in Christianity. For instance, many people believe that the 2 commandments given by Jesus Christ are Christian. Neither one of them are. The first one is in the book of Exodus, given by Moses, and his second commandment is in the book of Leviticus. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And Jesus, as a Hebrew rabbi, knew these 2 commandments, and he gave them to us, and they form the foundation of Christianity. But actually, they're not Christian, but neither are they Jewish. Because as you go back into the great Oriental teachings, more especially Egyptian, you find these same 2 commandments. Just as the Sermon on the Golden Rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, that has been given to us 5 times in 1,500 years before Jesus appeared on earth. So in obeying the Sermon on the Golden Rule, you are not doing it as a Christian, you're just doing it as a child of God, obeying God's laws regardless of to whom they were given. Now, when you understand that, you come to that place where you break down this middle wall of partition, and you are able to say, now I see, there is neither Greek nor Jew. There is neither bond nor free. We are all one in spiritual sonship. And you will find that all of these laws that we consider Judeo-Christian aren't really Judeo-Christian. They come to us long, long before that. Now, when you understand that, you can begin to understand that all law is spiritual law. It's not Jewish law, and it's not Christian law, and it is not Hindu law. Why, the law of karma, which many people believe to be Oriental, nonsensical. It appears in the Hebrew Scriptures, and Jesus made it one of his major points of religion. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. That's the law of karma. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. Paul repeated it. If you sow to the flesh, you reap corruption. If you sow to the Spirit, you will reap life everlasting, and that's karma. Karma means that whatever mode of life you pursue, that is the fruitage you will enjoy. If you are living according to spiritual standards, your life will manifest spiritual freedom, spiritual health, spiritual harmony. If you live in the belief that money is supply, or that the heart gives you life, that's what you'll reap. That's what will come through. And when the heart doesn't beat, your life will stop. But if you sow to the Spirit, you will realize, oh no, my heart doesn't govern my life. My life governs my heart. As long as there is a life, there will be a heartbeat. Now when you realize that, and you realize the infinite nature of life, you can keep your heart beating as long as you want. Because it has no power to talk back to God. It has no power to talk back to life, except that those living the material life are reaping their acceptance of material law. And the material law says that sooner or later the heart must go. And when it does, you go. So humanity keeps on dying. And even with all of the advances in knowledge, they still seem to keep dying around 70 years and 10, a few years more, a few years less, showing how deeply ingrained that Hebrew law is. And yet it isn't a law, it was just a belief. Just like the law of heredity was originally a Hebrew teaching, a Hebrew belief, that if the parents sinned, it would be visited on the children unto the third and the fourth generation. 200 years later, an enlightened Hebrew came along and said, no more shall you use this law in Israel. For each individual has to live according to their own deeds. Later on, the original Hebrew law was reinstated in materia medica. And so today we still suffer from the belief that the sins of the fathers are visited on the children. And not only to the third and fourth generation, but they now go much further than that. But you see, that never was a law, or it couldn't have been nullified. It was a Hebrew belief or teaching. These can be nullified when you discover the law. Now, the germ theory is not a law, it is a belief. How can I be so certain of that? Well, for one reason, I have treated people with germ diseases, flu, pneumonia, grip, so forth, and have healed them. Therefore proven that the germs were not power. Secondly, we have had experiences where, I'll tell you one of them. This is in some of the other tapes, but it'll bear repetition. When I was a practitioner in Boston, my name was registered with the Benevolent Association, and I was an official practitioner up there. And this was one of those February or March months when Boston is inundated with grips and flu and so forth. And I went home one night from my office with 29 cases of those things to care for. Came back to my office the next morning, and within a few minutes had 5 more. But at noon there was a blank hour on my pad, and I closed my doors and I went into meditation and asked the Father why this blank hour was here. What do you have for me? And the answer came, you do not have 34 cases. You have only 1. That is a belief in infection and contagion. But since God is the only creator, if there are any germs, God must have created them. They can't be destructive, and that's that. And before that evening was over, I was virtually clear of those cases. Phone call after phone call to tell me that in that hour they had felt their release. The next morning, when I went out to the Benevolent on a call, the lady at the desk greeted me with the fact that 25% of the staff were down with it, and nearly 50% of the visiting patients. And I said, you know, you're responsible for that. Which shocked her, as you're supposed to be the doorkeeper here. Now, we don't have any bad people for you to keep out. We don't have any drunks or thieves. So what are you the doorkeeper for? You mustn't allow anything to intrude into this place that defileth or maketh a lie. And what is operating here except a belief in epidemic, a belief in infection and contagion, and you've let it get by you, and it's in this place. Now it's up to you to do the work and get rid of it. Well, you can imagine she was quite shocked, but she knew me well enough to listen, and so together we worked there for a few minutes, and I brought to her attention what I had just had, that we're not dealing with all these people or all these cases. What we're dealing with is there's a belief in 2 powers, good and evil. There's a belief in infection and contagion as being destructive, whereas there is only one power. All that God made is good, and there is no destructive power. And within 24 hours that place was cleared. She made the mistake of telling it to the boss, and she got fired. But nevertheless, it took place. Now, we are not dealing with principalities or powers, you know. Therefore, we do not need the power of God to do anything for us. The power of God is already doing that which it's supposed to do. So we do not war with evil. We do not war with principalities or powers. We do not war with bad men. We do not war. We know the truth. And the truth is the infinite nature of God's being. Whether you take it up as life or law or substance or cause or power, each one of those words makes a new treatment. And then, or presence, or love, then you find that you don't address this treatment to your patient, you know it within yourself. What you know becomes the law to those who have turned to you for help. You must remember that you here as a class are embodied in my consciousness. Therefore, the truth which permeates my consciousness is a law unto you, as long as you are here as students in this class. A long time ago, I told a class, you're not even permitted to die during this class because we mustn't have the class broken up. In our last class, we had a woman who tried it, but she didn't succeed. Now, always remember this. Your household, your families, your business, if you're a teacher, your scholars, or students, or patients, all of these are embraced in your consciousness. And the truth, you know, becomes a law unto their experience. Now, of course, there will always be some who will not be receptive and responsive because they are sowing to the flesh. And they do not hold themselves consciously or unconsciously receptive to truth. Others who are not definitely antagonistic to the Spirit, to the idea of God, or who are not deeply and specifically sowing to the flesh in a personal or definite way, these may be receptive even without any knowledge of or desire for truth. Therefore, you take on a tremendous responsibility, because you want everyone within range of your consciousness to show forth the same harmony, joy, life, prosperity that you are having. And there's only one way in which you can help in that, and that is to maintain your consciousness absolutely pure. That means not accepting beliefs of good and evil or of power apart from God. Don't interpret that as some do to mean that this is barring human affection from your life. On any level, it isn't. Human affection in our experience is entirely rightful, and at every level, the marital as well as any other. So don't believe that that bars you, for these things are not sin. But when I say purity, I mean purity in the absolute sense that you must be praying without ceasing. You must maintain God as the only presence and power and law, and you must forever be impersonalizing by accepting all appearances of evil, whether they appear as person, place, thing, or condition, throw them out there into the carnal mind and then nothingize them. When you do that, everyone who becomes a part of your consciousness in some measure feels it. Now, I want to show you how far and wide this goes. As I travel, I never talk truth. I never speak about my work or my books. I never enter into any religious conversation except in the line of my work, where I'm asked. It isn't my function to proselyte or to interfere in anyone's life, and if at the moment it pleases them to sow to the flesh, that must be their pleasure. When they're ready for the Spirit, they'll find the teacher or teaching necessary to them. But you do not know how many times things take place when going for rooms in a hotel, or tickets in the airfield, or the handling of baggage, or in many, many different walks of life, where the influence is felt and somebody knows that something has happened, or that there is something different taking place and an attraction is formed. In other words, without knowing why, they know that something is. Now, what is this something? It is the lack of criticism, judgment, condemnation through impersonalization. It is this living in the allness of God. It is not accepting any material or mental power as power, and that leaves a state of consciousness at peace. And anyone who enters that state of consciousness, even with a tiny bit of receptivity, knows that something has happened to them. That is why this message is invited into metaphysical churches and metaphysical centers, because they feel from the contact the peace, even when they don't know why, and even when they don't agree with the principles. They still feel it. So it is that you can always recognize a student when you're around them by that very thing, that there is a peace and a poise that comes because they are not warring with evil. They have found their peace because of the realization that the evils of the world are not power. They're not fearing whether communism comes or not. They're not fearing whether bombs come or not. They're not fearing whether this or that political party gets in power. It is true that they are at work always, knowing that the carnal mind cannot operate, whether in the political field, the governmental field, the educational field, the religious field. Our students must be praying without ceasing to know that the carnal mind, whether in the form of ambition, lust for power, greed for money, has no outlet and no inlet, because it isn't power and it isn't person and it's a nothingness. As you do this, you influence the very politics of your community and ultimately of the nation.